Yo guys, sorry you already know that today we are back playing some more Raging Loop. On the last time we started a huge history lesson. We are currently in the Nosato mansion, and we are reading about basically the history of the village and the surrounding areas and learning a lot. It's kind of information overload, but we are, I assume, going to pull out things that are going to be necessary for us to complete the game. So let's go ahead and continue the history lesson. So Nosato's great-great-grandfather was writing the previous section, but then as it states, the next section was started out by Kinosuke's great-grandfather, but after his writing grew worse and worse and finally stopped, his son took over. So Kinosuke's father, I assume. According to Kinosuke, his great-grandfather had gotten a mental illness and began acting eccentric. He'd seen it with his own eyes. The final reasonable bits of writing left behind by him cursed his deteriorating mind and hoped that his descendants would take over his research. His wish was fulfilled when Kinosuke's grandfather found this room and took over. Oh, great-grandfather and then grandfather. Whoops, I'm dumb. That makes a lot more sense. This section was primarily made to give detailed descriptions to the outdated rites and customs of Fushiyoshi. Naturally, the lack of historical accounts was a hindrance. However, the documents owned by the Nosato family and the knowledge he gained as the head made it possible to do it. He was also married to someone with ties to the Meguruma, so he also gained access to some Meguruma records. Having gathered info from various sources, he reached some reliable conclusions. Though his efforts to gather information had made him the target of the other head families, his mind also seemed to deteriorate during his twilight years. The final bits of writing in the diary seemed to scream his fear of death. He died on May 1st, 15 years ago. The text here made it evident that he died in the Feast of the Yomi Purge. As the hand of the supernatural looms over us and takes our lives, I realize that I am losing control of my mind. Now that I have seen the might of the god I was to venerate, what duty do I have to continue the previous head's research into our homeland of Fushiyoshi? I'll probably be hanged tomorrow, and in all honesty, it seems like a favorable outcome at this point. What if the irresistible urge to sleep faded and I open my eyes to see the wolf-faced god? I'd be unable to bear the fear. The wolf's bane I shall use to end my life lies in my hand. And that was it. Kinosuke's voice was shaking. From what he said, his grandfather was an intelligent gentleman that he knew personally and respected immensely. Anyway, the text here could be summed up as this. Fushiyoshi had several strange rites and customs. When combined with the ones unique to the specific head families, the number grew exponentially. It revealed all the details about these things and even had info we didn't really care about right now. The content about the Uematsu was particularly harsh, even though it was noted that not everything was here. Info about the Meguruma, however, was extremely limited. However, it was said that horrible screams could be heard from their storehouse. Okay. That day, I playfully opened the iron door to the basement of the third lookout. I was told to never go there, and the door had that symbol on it. And, ooh, it was a morbidly interesting read, but there was only one thing that mattered to us. It was the custom of lynching in Yasumizu. Yes, and human sacrifice. It was basically describing the Feast of the Yomi Purge. The Yukami-sama would return from Yomi to get revenge for being killed. The story was the same. There were two notable points here. One was that it had apparently begun about 500 years ago, after the village closed itself off from the world, and the other was that Kama Fujiyoshi was mostly uninvolved in the feast of that era. Kinosuke's grandfather examined the feast's origin from various angles. He investigated the stones in the Hanging Pines graveyard, looked at the records of Kama Fushiyoshi's mason, and concluded that Kama Fushiyoshi were making the graves. And according to the mason records, the Okiba were placed in Yasumizu at this time too. 500 years of history was enough to make it a historic landmark, but they were no megaliths from millennia BCE. They were simply put there to help turn the village into Great Lord Shinai's worshipping holy ground. The words left behind by the elders of Kama Fujiyoshi and Yasumizu gave us even more info. There was the legend that in a time when samurai still existed, Yomibito poured out of Yasumizu and attacked Kama Fujiyoshi. That coincided with the rebellion Kinosuke had mentioned, the reason why the head families oppressed Yasumizu. Looking at both the documents and word of mouth, the rebellion had happened 5 centuries ago and shortly before the village became isolated. In Yasumizu, Yomibito were said to be scary creatures completely covered in blood water. I did not want to see this ever again. This is so scary to me. You could find the word blood water by playing with the kanji in the name Seranaga. Bloodwater Rapids, the stream was considered corrupted even half a millennium ago. Anyway, though the legend was warped by superstition, there was no denying that Kama Fujiyoshi was attacked by people covered in Seranaga mud. The grandfather concluded without a doubt that this incident was what made Kama Fujiyoshi people so afraid of Yasumizu. The rebellion was the very cause of the decades of isolation, the creation of the Shinai faith, and the start of the Feast of the Yomi Purge. As for what that meant, it was all planned for the purpose of holding the already discriminated Yasumizu down and preventing further rebellion. Okay, thank you for taking that picture away. The grandfather thought that Yasumizu was purposely created to be discriminated against. It was a bad, dangerous place to live in. The reason why it wasn't abandoned wasn't mentioned here, but anyway, people continued calling it home. In governing, intentionally creating a lower class and treating them poorly satisfied the upper class and thus made their governance easier. It was something you saw all over the world. Even in Japan, there was complicated historical discrimination that left its mark even on the current era. Thus, the presence of a settlement meant to be looked down upon was good for the leaders of that era. However, they didn't want any more rebellions. So, how could they stop it? One way was to make them fight amongst themselves. Another was to make them so superstitious they wouldn't even think of rebelling. Basically, they had to make them believe the lie that there was wolves among them who were killing people, causing them to kill each other. The lie. Yeah. Okay. By doing that, they would sap any strength Yasumizu needed to rebel. They also prepared a background story to make them believe that the anomaly was actually real. The grandfather guessed that this was the true purpose of the 5-century-old religion. His sources for that were the documents gathered by his predecessor, which claimed that people from the local temples and shrines were called into the village. He assumed that the incomplete or intentionally destroyed records were those regarding the scholars they summoned to help create the religion. That seemed absurd at first, but after thinking about it, it was entirely reasonable. The settlement they looked down upon had bared their fangs at them, so what did they do? Call the smart people for help. That was natural. And so, those scholars teamed up, created a new religion, and made the settlement fight itself. And if they had given the head families rules in their religion to assure proper control, man, it sounded messed up, but it didn't seem impossible. It's the other way around. It's so that people of Kama Fujiyoshi wouldn't have to look into the eyes of the people of Yasumizu, who may or may not be Yomobito. They wanted to avoid eye contact not only because they thought they were corrupted, but also because they were afraid. Kama Fujiyoshi was afraid of Yasumizu. It was a possibility I wouldn't have considered before, but it also seemed likely. It'd be pretty scary if the people they looked down upon finally let their grudge take over and become fearful marauders ready to enact their revenge. And because they were aware of how badly they treated the settlement, the guilt grew even larger, and they started controlling and discriminating against them even further. When you looked at it that way, they made a whole religion just to protect themselves. And boy, was that insane. Now, with the feast's origin revealed, what was that about the head families not being involved in it so much? Apparently, the first feasts were a lot simpler than the current one. There was the purification, sheltering, dreaming, and the limit of one per day, but there was no actual punishment for breaking these laws. Oh. They probably set it up to prevent indiscriminate massacres. Also, there was no wolf selection, and there were no guardians. The heads, or Fujiyoshi leaders at that time, only circulated the Yasumizu legend that the wolves came back. By spreading the local legend along with the lie, they motivated the people to kill each other whenever the mist appeared. It was successful, and the people started killing suspected wolves every time the mist showed up. In response to that, those who spread the suspicions were brutalized at night. This weakened Yasumizu, left the place a breeding ground for future problems, and too weak to rebel. Wait, that doesn't make sense. Why do they kill each other just because of that? How can there be murders without any real threat? The past isn't the present. There were times where superstition could make people murder one another. Your grandfather uses the word lynch right from the start. I think that's important. I think that the Feast of the Omi Purge was actually useful to the people of Yasumizu too. What do you mean? Let's keep reading. Sure enough, the grandfather seemed to believe that, to the people of Yasumizu, the feast made the killings into a just cause. According to this, the feast wasn't considered a paranormal event, not even by the Yasumizu people themselves. It was just a justification for lynching. The hand of the law didn't reach this backwards village, and Yasumizu was even more isolated, a settlement for the ostracized. Of course, there had to be conflicts and wrongings, and the social system to solve them was limited. Thus, there was a demand for solutions beyond the law, and the feast fit the bill perfectly. When the mist came, they could easily get rid of people they didn't like. However, that came with the risk of being targeted by their friends and family. This continuous cycle of lynchings and revenge eventually destroys the minority and leaves the majority wounded. The feast ends and the law returns to Yasumizu. It seemed like the ostracism they'd done in ancient Greece. Anyone who was against the law of the village had their names written on pottery and voted to be exiled. A backwards but effective way to keep order. Though while the punishment there was exile, the feast came with the death penalty. It was clearly unjust, but they found it better than nothing. By having these occasional unlawful disputes, they actually prevented the settlement as a whole from crumbling. Those who participated in the lynchings had their guilt lessened by considering the legends and myths. Superstition had real-world effects. By telling people that they'd be hanged if they were bad, the renegades among them would be silenced. So yeah, the Feast of the Omi Purge had its perks with Kama Fujiyoshi and Yasumizu. Also, apparently, it's a long-running tradition for Kama Fujiyoshi to do certain things immediately before the mist came. They summoned the children of Yasumizu to Kama Fujiyoshi and called the women to help them with food. There was no end to these records. It was much like the mountain festival. They cared for the stick they constantly provided the settlement. But it was also a form of population control. They didn't want Yasumizu to be completely depopulated, so they protected the children. This tradition was alive to this day. Even 8 years ago, Tai-san, Kaori-san, and the children had been saved from the feast when they were called. That makes sense. So, while it had its roots in superstition, the Feast of the Omi Purge became a kind of social tool. So there has to be a way to start it, essentially. I see, controlled lynching, or perhaps capital punishment by popular vote. It's only useful to us Kama Fujiyoshi people, and it doesn't spread outside of Yasumizu. Muro and the youths are right. The village heads are the bad guys here. I'm not sure about that. The leaders from that era might have intended this to be a kindness meant to ensure stability. The problem is that it continues to this day. Yes, this is something that shouldn't be happening in Yasumizu today. Is that what it says? It says there were 3 feasts during and after the war. Yeah, 1 during the war and then 2 after. That makes sense. The feast meant to manage society had ended with the one that began at the start of World War II. When Kinoskishi's grandfather wrote this, he called it the previous feast. The ones who survived it said that an actual wolf had appeared. Also, rules like sheltering, which had been ignored until then, now came with a supernatural punishment. Okay, so the one in World War II seemed to be the origin of the modern-day version of the feast. The legend had gone from mere story to reality. The grandfather himself had witnessed some paranormal things too. There was a pile of dog corpses that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The thorough, violent deaths given to the rule breakers. The wolves who could come in through locked doors and brutalize the ones inside. And finally, the unity between the wolves hell-bent on killing the humans, even if it meant their own death. That was the feast I knew. The next test was written by the previous head, Kinoskishi's father, and he'd observed the 3rd feast of the recent times. It was the one that happened 8 years ago, and survivors mentioned impossible paranormal events that actually happened. It was the same, the exact same. The feast had been supernatural 3 times in a row. And this was the 4th one. That meant that something had drastically changed with the feast that happened during the war. The reason for that wasn't given here. Are you okay? Must be shocking. Should we take a break? No, I'm fine. Let's keep reading. Next is a text left by my father. Oh my god, this is like never ending. Not to say that none of this is interesting, but this is a bit long-winded. Like Kinosuke said, the final section of the diary was written by the previous head of the Nosato family. He'd inherited the will of his predecessors and tried solving this mystery, though unlike them, he seemed to prioritize documents that had been released to the public. For one, there were cutouts of articles. He'd taken various clippings from newspapers and magazines to create an extremely large scrapbook. There were bits from local newspapers, national ones, and Post General, and specialized magazines of varied renown. Basically, he gathered all the info regarding Fujiyoshi, no matter how minor. Of course, we didn't have the time to look through all of them, so we relied on the index in the diary. We found out that this small village had a number of unexpectedly major events happen in it. They were so big that they actually made it to national newspapers. Some of the oldest and more notable ones were the articles about the serial murders here that had happened here over 60 years ago. There were a number of articles with titles like 20 deadly break-ins in Fujiyoshi and murders in 20 houses in Mountain Village, and I found that number to be significant. Though the number of places that had been attacked was 20, the number of casualties was 17, 8 more were injured. Regardless, it was definitely big enough to make a mark on Japanese history. This event was well covered for something that had happened on the eve of World War II, and ended with the culprit being sent to Tokyo and quickly executed. The incident was reported for 2 years, from when it came to light right up to the capital punishment. It could be summed up like this. On December 27, 1940, in Fujiyoshi Village, Kamafujiyoshi, Hochizuki, a man covered in mud, invaded a private dwelling. He quickly used the kitchen knife he had to attack 2 of the people inside, destroy property, then escape. One of the victims went on to die. The culprit went on to continue invading houses in Hochizuki, murder, and destroy property. After 30 minutes of this, he escaped Fujimura by foot. The crime was so sudden that the inhabitants and the local police couldn't do anything about it before it was over. The incident came to light when the local police reported it to the Metropolitan Police. Since cars weren't widespread in the area yet, the doctors from the surrounding villages hurried over with their horse-drawn carriages. That was how much of a big deal it was. The police had gathered a number of officers and established a perimeter to surround the culprit, but in the end, they failed to arrest him. The witnesses' bloodstains and lost items made them conclude that the culprit had changed his clothes somewhere up the mountain, then escaped by going down the river. They followed after him, but since it was the end of the year and it was hard to get around, it took them time to find proper footprints. On January 3rd of the following year, the prefecture police noticed that the perimeter was broken, but this wasn't reported. The investigations that followed bore no fruit, and the newspapers and magazines wrote a lot about the escaped or hidden murderer. But then, at one afternoon, at the end of January, a man showed up in a police station in Mangetsubashi, Tokyo, and said that he was the murderer who had escaped Fujiyoshi. There had been such speculation about where the culprit was from, but it turned out that he was actually a local, which raised a few questions. One of them was, why couldn't the locals figure out who it was? This question was left unanswered, and the man who turned himself in, Kihei Toshitani, 30 years old, became a subject of significant controversy. From this point on, the major newspapers simply reported how the trial was going, while the magazines just had a ton of opinion pieces. Kinoskishi's father commented that the Miguruma were actively keeping journalists from entering Yasumizu. At the same time, they didn't resist the police, and in fact were highly cooperative. But in the end, Yasumizu wasn't really mentioned in the trial reports. It could have been the weak legislative system of the time, or the result of the Miguruma's efforts. Under such circumstances, they held Kihei Toshitani's trial. He insisted on several things: that he was too drunk to remember the details. However, he was certain that he was a murderer. He lived in that area and was on bad terms with his neighbors to the point of holding a serious grudge. When he sobered up, he became scared and ran away, and since he knew he couldn't keep running forever, he just turned himself in. He was too afraid to return to Fujiyoshi. I don't know if that really adds up, but maybe. Some had found his statement that he'd attacked 20 households in 30 minutes questionable, but it was a trial under significant public scrutiny, and since Kihei Toshitani admitted to the crime, he was executed based solely on that. It happened 2 years after his arrest. The capital punishment was carried out, and he departed this world without further comment of note. The news agencies were now all covering World War II, so the these serial murders ended up being forgotten. Also, Kie no Skishi's father noted something about him. 3 years before the incident, Kie Toshitani had been sent to Yasumizu because of trouble with his neighbors. Okay. This is interesting. It is. Kie Toshitani probably based his crime on the Yomibito legends. He wasn't in Yasumizu for long, yet he went and did something so awful. All of Fujiyoshi is afraid of Yomibito, so maybe he turned it around and tried becoming one with them to seem scary. Or perhaps he'd heard of the old rebellion that we village heads know about. I'm mostly curious about the timing. The feast during the war, the first real one, happened about 2 years after this incident. It's like a repeat. Yes, it's like that time 500 years ago when they created the Shinai faith to keep the rebels in check. Okay. Of course there were no mentions of the feast in the articles. The next notable thing was the time when the war ended and the soldiers returned to Fujiyoshi. These news articles were accompanied by the village PR notices and photos. One of the men in the photos had the name Shosaburo Makishima. Okay. That face and expression, I had no doubt that he was related to Kazo Makishima. Many from Fujiyoshi had departed for the war, and actually some of them were from Yasumizu. Also, according to the reports, they had a notably good survival rate. They had also achieved a lot on the front lines, and the PR said it was the blessing of the Ukami-sama. In a different document, it was said that they had charms that resembled the Ukami symbols used in the mountain festival. Okay. There was a photo that showed one of these crests wrinkled from wear. The shape was new to me. However, the 3 diamond-like symbols made me think that it was related to the one I was familiar with, which was actually pictured here. Yeah, okay, the text next to it said that some chose to wear ominous symbols instead. For reference, there was the divine crest of Great Lord Shinai. It was actually my first time seeing it, and apparently they couldn't use it as a good luck charm because it was just too important. Well then, if it was that sacred, it made sense that I hadn't seen it in Yasumizu. It was a bad place after all. Next, we skipped the unimportant bits, such as the election results and major staff changes. We went ahead a few decades and arrived at an article from the 80s. This was pretty bad. Cholera outbreak in Mountain Village, 4 dead. Okay. It was a pretty simple incident. Apparently, someone who'd gone on a trip overseas had infected the village. The name of patient 0 was hidden, but it had to be one of the village heads. They were the only ones here who could travel to other countries. It was damn awful to read about, but apparently the disease spread through water contaminated by the first victim's vomit and excreta, and there were victims in both Fujiyoshi as well as Yasumizu. Also, it was only reported after the disease had subsided, which was probably caused by the Meguruma intelligence network. Looking at when it happened, you should have been alive during this, right? You were in middle school, I assume? Yes, I know about it too well. I was infected myself after all. Huh, you had cholera? Yes, in fact, it got to a lot of people, especially here in Yasumizu. What, even though still here? It happened to Sir Makishima, Yamawaki-san, and oh yes, even Muro had it. The outbreak must have been pretty big. It was. Later on, I found out that the Nosato quickly identified it as cholera, but the Meguruma... Huh, what? They made the absurd claim that Shinai-sama's protection would make short work of the cholera and perform some strange ritual while attempting to prevent the Nosato from applying proper treatment. Thanks to that, the situation grew worse, and I, who got infected late, had my treatment postponed because I was one of us. I see. The Nosato are a family of model doctors, as if we simply adhered to the order established by the Meguruma. Of course, Yasumizu was low on the list, and that caused the deaths of 2 infected and 2 Uematsu who were treating the people. What, 2 Uematsu? The Uematsu still had a few members back then, but most of them were infected while trying to make use of their folk medicine. Once that was found out, the disease had advanced so much that they were beyond help and died soon after. It's safe to say that event sealed the fate of the Uematsu. If the Meguruma had handled things properly... No, that's not it. If the Nosato had done what any proper family of doctors would do and simply ignore them and done the right thing... By the way, was Rikaku Uematsu's son infected? She was only 9 at the time. Surely you understand that she was too young to partake in the family trade. So, wait, she's like 27 now. She would have been 9 at some point in the 80s? So, does this game just take place in like 2005? 2006? Somewhere around, like, this is like mid-2000s. This game came out in like 2015, but this game does not seem to be taking place in the year that it came out. Okay, interesting. Oh, I see. I knew what he meant, but something didn't feel right. His eyes betrayed a sense of confusion, and his tone lacked confidence. Are you hiding something? No. It's nothing. Anyway, though this shows how warped Fujiyoshi is, it's not directly related to the feast. Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't push any further this time. I feel like you should. Another major article was one about a corpse that had washed up in the local part of Seranaga, officially known as Seranagawa, apparently. It was a woman from Chiba, and she had a search party out for her. It said that she'd simply committed suicide. Is this related to the feast? No, the date doesn't match any of the feast dates so far. She must be just an unrelated suicide victim. Then there's the idiots from the city coming here just to hang themselves or getting eaten by the wild beasts. Me and the old man always have to deal with the mess. It's not rare for Saranaga to bring us corpses either. I don't know if they're mountain fishers or something, but it's dangerous upstream, damn it. Okay. City person who gone all the way here to die, huh? Well, maybe one of the village heads had her killed, but if that's the case, he wouldn't have left her in Saranaga. Then let's ignore that. What's this about a heavy rain from 8 years ago, though? It doesn't seem related to Fujiyoshi. I feel it is important that Fujiyoshi is not mentioned here. There's reports of landslides all over the area, but none for Fujiyoshi. Oh, I see. So even the ones who'd supposedly died in the landslide were hidden from the public. Besides that, there's nothing of note. What about this? Serial filers in Minatoku, possibly arson? Why is it here? It's explained in the diary. It's not reported, but all the 7 buildings set on fire belong to the same person. What does that mean? It's a Meguruma. They have real estate outside Fujiyoshi as well. I see. So they gain funds that way too. But why would they do this? Because the religion is profitable, no? A faith with half a millennium of history behind it can't be considered a new religion. There must be a lot of Shinai believers outside as well, though they're probably not as fanatical as us. I imagine that some of their families have been donating to the shrine for generations. Are the Meguruma a recognized religion? I don't know that much, but I imagine that the country would be pretty involved with them if it was, no? I don't know, I'm not well versed in that. Now, this seems to be the end. Yeah, okay. It's time to really start summarizing the big points that we need to take away from this. We'd read the entire diary. A whole 3 hours had passed since we started. The mist would come soon. I learned a lot from this. But if you ask me, all I'd gotten here were maybes. Nothing was certain yet. Even so, I thought it was more than enough for this loop. Oh, what to do? It looks like even Father went insane and drank poison without reaching the truth. If you're alright and I'm about to die in the feast, my brother would probably follow his footsteps. Or wait, if you die, will this all have never happened? Oh dear, looks like there's nothing we can do. His wry grin pained my heart a bit. I had to say it. I'm sorry, Kinosuke Nosachi-san. It's nothing you have to apologize for. It's Fujiyoshi's fault for doing something so absurd. But what is the cause of the madness controlling everyone here? Is it really just a fear of superstition or rebellion? No, that's not it. It's God's fault. Huh? You too? You're going to shift blame to the divine just like my forefathers did? Also, you still haven't given an explanation for the paranormal happenings you'd experienced. I'm sorry, but I actually think I can give a scientific, or rather, reasonable explanation for God. What? Though I still need to properly process this. Instead, I can give a clear explanation for everything else. I missed my chance to properly apologize. How much time do we have, I wondered? Will they wait for long? Then explain the mysteries of the feast. How do you explain the inescapable corruption? How does it find and punish you no matter how well you hide? Cameras and listening devices. Wait a minute. They're gonna somehow be able to explain this all as not being supernatural? There's no way. There's no way. He stared blankly for a moment, then laughed. Of all the answers, cameras? There's no way they had those in the war. I'm not saying that they did. In fact, I'm not sure if there were any 8 years ago either. Though there might have been something basic back then. Hell, it could have been 2 cans and a string. Or else they just put a spy in here. Now that would be excessive. What I'm saying is that all of Yasumizu is being observed. It can't be. The village heads are too busy for that. But they're the same people who'd spent unbelievable amounts of effort to create the foundation for the Shinai faith. I understand how you feel. You find it absurdly hard to believe. But the incredulity you're feeling right now is exactly how magic tricks are kept secret. When you look at what magicians do, you find out they're either things that were too silly for someone to fall for, or extremely complex setups that made you believe they just couldn't have prepared them. The one where the audience turns into cherry blossoms is a good example. I'd actually have been surprised that all of Yasumizu were the targets of a really bad prank ever since I come here. Well, wait, then how do you explain the severely damaged corpses? They just carried them away and destroyed them with machinery or something. That doesn't make sense. You yourself said that you can't leave Yasumizu once it's covered by mist. There must be secret underground passages or something. Oh, wait. So they actually let loose some dogs, kill the targets, use the secret passages to bring the corpses back to Come Fujiyoshi, then waste time to damage them and bring them back to Yasumizu? That's absurd. Too absurd. And that's exactly why everyone believes them. The only things that I feel like are not adding up, though, is the corruption at night. Because, like, we were a wolf out at night, and there were, like, you know, dogs and creatures, like, coming after us, and Chiemi has attested to having to fight off, like, dogs for hours on end. Or, like, dog-like creatures that are, like, corruption and stuff. Like, what is that? Like, at night, they release these dogs, and then they're able to capture them all up before the day comes or something? Like, it seems a bit far-fetched. There was plenty of times that we tried to escape. We made it to a road, and then the mist comes, and we just kind of die. I guess that could be explained by something happening to us. By, like, a person. There's still enough supernatural things that I'm just not sure about how this is all being executed. Then what about the doors that open when you touch them? That's true, too. Must be electronic remote-controlled locks. In those shabby, apologies, simple-looking dwellings in Yasumizu, even the worst buildings can have electronic locks. It'd make for a good camouflage, even. Then, can they? How would the electronic work without being discovered? Interesting. How do you explain the Guardian marks drawn in blood? The results of Snake's investigations are also delivered in blood text, right? You definitely know if it was a human. Anesthetic gas gets the job done easily. Surely you know that a mix of nitrous oxide and a type of octogen creates a perfect anesthetic. It also has no smell. It's dangerous because of this, so people often add something with a scent to it, but in this case, that's a benefit. Don't be stupid. Well, I'll admit you know a bit of medicine, but anesthesia is so difficult, there's even specialists. Well, there are specialists here besides the Nosato, right? Even if there are, and even if they modified the dwellings here enough to create isolated spaces, there's no guarantee that anyone could safely come back from the forced loss of consciousness in a place without any life support. Oh, okay, so I wonder, there's a choice that we need to make about hiding in the outhouse, I think. And I wonder if once we put together all of these things about it maybe not being supernatural, maybe we do leave and confront the quote-unquote monster with, like, reasonable, you know, like, logic and stuff on our side, and we're able to, like, see through the tricks to be able to, like, really bust out, like, what's happening. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like that might be the direction we're going. Exactly, they don't have to come back. Even if someone ended up dying, they could just destroy the evidence, toss the body aside, and make them look like rule breakers who didn't shelter. No, that is absurd and vile. I know, I have a hard time accepting this too. But if it's possible, then it's not the work of a god. If something mysterious can be explained using mundane means, then it was caused by mundane means in Sato-san. Okay, I understand that it's possible to make it happen, why you believe that it's how it is, and why you apologized. The fact that this room was left as is means that they can't, that they either didn't find it or couldn't enter it. But now that we've made such a show of searching and argue so loudly, they must have noticed us. Assuming they, as you said, have cameras and listening devices. Uh-oh. That's probably not good. And if they notice us, they cannot let us live. They must kill us before the feast starts. This is... yes. My consciousness began to fade. The irresistible drowsiness took over my body. They were somehow able to get gas in here to knock us out, and then they're going to kill us. Interesting. Okay. You win. See? But didn't you have a better way to go about this? I'm sorry. Unable to stand, I fell to my knees. I hit my forehead on the desk, but the pain was minimal. It didn't kill me, huh? I know you have one, old man. There, this is it. He could still move. Crawling on his hands and knees, he opened a drawer and took out a small glass bottle. If you die, it will all be undone, won't it? Then take this aconite. It'd trouble you if they caught and interrogated you. I appreciated that. I reached out, took it, and put it in my mouth. Oh, okay. They think that they're on to me, as Haruaki, and are purposely going to leave me alive so they can question me and stuff and not let me die. Okay. I'll have some too, even if this will all be erased. Wasting all that my forefathers gathered would be a sin. Oh. Just one last sentence. I won't waste it, I promise. I just had to say that much. I now had a duty to fulfill for this awkward man. With every loop, I gained not only memories, but one-sided responsibilities as well. That meant that I really had to save everyone, right? Okay. Death came quick. So, right now, even if the loop can somehow be explained with not supernatural stuff, the end result still has to be supernatural with the giant monster destroying Japan. The fact that, I mean, that possession of, like, a god or whatever, unless it was just Haruaki going crazy, you know, it, like, took over Mako, it took over himself. Like, it was kind of some wild stuff. This is just, like, the result of the dream. I don't know how the dream comes into play with all this. This is a lot to take in. But alright, death came quick. Let's get to the end of this one. Let's see where the game wants me to go next. Alright, the key 8 Will of the Crow. Alright, let's, I do want to read this one. What the heck? Are we just down to one last key? Number 8? Oh, or number 1. Number 1 is the last key that we need. Oh my gosh. As I thought, Kinosuke was a reasonable man. With his help, I was able to learn the head's perception of the Feast of the Yomi Purge as well as the long historical background behind it. Through death, I learned the Miguruma are using a cutting-edge surveillance network and are intervening with Yasumizu. This will be a huge clue to resolving the incident. This is crazy. I cannot wait to see how everything is explained. This is wild. Alright, Sheep Man. Bad ending number 11. Yeah, I think there's only one more bad ending left, actually. And then there's 3 just like good endings or neutral endings. You did achieve your team key 8, one of the final keys. This is one of the longest parts of the solution chapter, eh? And there was a ton of content. Let's sum it up. Yes, please. Bad ending 11, flirting in the dark with Kinosuke, assassination. You obtained 2 important pieces of information this time. First was the long history of Fujiyoshi, as investigated by the village heads. Second was the surveillance network known as the Eye of the Meguruma. Haruaki Fusaishi had faintly suspected the existence of a surveillance network for a while now. That dumbass should have said something sooner. Yeah, that would have been nice, because I had no idea. As for the history aspect, he got to the heart of the feast and Great Lord Shinai, I see. How will these bear fruit? Get hyped for the final acceleration! By the way, if you've been going the normal route, you should have already have 4 of the last keys by this point. If you use 3 of them, you can unlock the Locket 2, Dense Mist, Hide in the Outhouse. Oh, we can do the Outhouse thing next. Let's go! You might find that really weird, but trust me, it's a really important branch. For those of you who haven't gotten the necessary keys, snap back to go see Ending 3 and check the flow of events. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, we have the necessary keys, though. Okay, got it. Okay, that's it for this time. Die another hearty death next time. We sure will. I'm going to go ahead and end it off here. On the next time, we are going to go ahead and jump into Dense Mist, because I assume what he's trying to say is, I don't remember what key you got at the end of this one here, but I assume whatever this one here is needs to, oh, you get key 4. Okay, and then key 4 must be one of the ones that we need for the outhouse? Where is that at? No, I guess not, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's just related that there's something there that you need to know, but we've definitely already done that. So, we have the keys necessary. This is where we're going to go next. The evening mist came, and we have to hide in the outhouse. Or do we? I can't wait to find out. So, that is the next plan of action. Hopefully, you are enjoying and looking forward to that. If so, let me know. But I'll see you on the next time. So, till then, peace out.